The successes of the Russian army on the battlefield in Ukraine are haunting the so-called Western leaders. Realizing that the West is losing Ukraine, Washington, together with other NATO countries, is doing everything possible to make sure that Russia pays a heavy price for achieving its goals in the Special Military Operations Zone. Realizing that it would not be possible to cope with the Russian army on the battlefield in Ukraine, the West began to strike at Russia's allies in the Middle East. So, over the past 72 hours, the situation in Syria has sharply escalated. In particular, terrorists from the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, together with pro-Turkish militants from the so-called Free Syrian Army, launched a large-scale offensive on a wide front, in the north of Aleppo province. The main goal of these terrorists is to capture the largest city in Syria, Aleppo. Unfortunately, the experienced Syrian army was unable to stop the well-armed militants. In the last 24 hours alone, the terrorists have managed to advance 15 kilometers. It is reported that as of November 30, 2024, terrorists from the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and pro-Turkish militants from the Free Syrian Army are located just 5 kilometers from the western suburbs of Aleppo. According to the authoritative Telegram channel Middle East Spectator, the terrorists continue their rapid offensive, pushing the Syrian army east of Idlib. In the last 2 days alone, the terrorists have posted dozens of videos online, with captured Syrian soldiers, many of whom were executed live on the air. Moreover, the Syrian army has also lost control of the important M5 highway that runs south of the city of Aleppo. At the same time, it is worth noting that the city of Sarakib, located next to this highway, is an important defense hub for the Syrian army. If the terrorists capture this city, the situation of the Syrian army will deteriorate significantly along the entire combat contact line. Meanwhile, reputable Middle Eastern news sources claim that it is only thanks to Russian combat aviation that terrorists have not yet managed to capture cities such as Aleppo and Sarakib, in northwestern Syria. In particular, it became known that on the night of November 29, the Russian aerospace forces conducted a successful operation to destroy the manpower and commanders of the terrorist group Al-Amshat. My dear truth seekers, let me remind you that Ankara actively supports this terrorist group. The militants of Al-Amshat are actually Turkey's strike force in the northwestern part of Syria. Moreover, Middle Eastern sources also confirmed the information that active duty officers of the Turkish and Ukrainian armies lead many units of these terrorist groups, advancing on Aleppo and Sarakib. In particular, Turkish and Ukrainian officers command many units of such pro-Turkish and pro-American terrorist groups as Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Al-Amshat, Faylaq al-Sham, and Liwa Asafat al-Shamal. It is reported that in the last 48 hours alone, Russian combat aviation managed to destroy about 10 Turkish and Ukrainian officers in the northwestern part of Syria. Thus, it becomes clear that Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has once again betrayed Vladimir Putin, who saved the life of this two-headed snake in 2016. It is obvious that the Turkish president could not launch this military operation without Washington's approval. The fact that Ukrainian officers along with their colleagues from Turkey command many units of these terrorist groups indicates that the offensive operation in northwestern Syria was planned and organized by the United States, NATO, Turkey, and Ukraine. Moreover, they chose the perfect moment to attack. The fact is that Iran is in confrontation with Israel and cannot support the Syrian army at the same level. Lebanese Hezbollah is also unable to provide support to Syria, as units of this movement suffered significant losses in the war against Tel Aviv. Moscow also cannot afford to send its experienced generals and equipment to Syria, as Vladimir Putin's top priority right now is a special military operation in Ukraine.
Moreover, the Syrian army has also lost strong support on the ground from experienced fighters from the PMC Wagner group.
The fact is that at the moment, all the fighters of this legendary private military company are in Ukraine and the hottest spots of Africa. Against this backdrop, it becomes clear why Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan decided to join Moscow's enemies and stab Russia in the back at this very moment.
In addition, a few days before the resumption of hostilities in Syria, Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan refused Vladimir Putin's mediation efforts and did not enter into a dialogue with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
Well, I am absolutely sure that many of you were not surprised by such a despicable act by Erdogan, and that many of you expected such betrayal from Turkey. On the contrary, it would be strange if Erdogan did not take advantage of this situation and refuse to unite with Russia's enemies. However, in the current situation, Russia is more concerned about the intentions of the United States than Turkey's actions in Syria. The fact is that the events in Syria are a continuation of Washington's policy of weakening Moscow's position in the upcoming negotiations. By allowing Kiev to fire Western long-range missiles deep into Russian territory and launching a new full-scale offensive in Syria, the United States is trying to weaken Russia's position as much as possible in the upcoming negotiations on Ukraine, and force Moscow to conclude peace in Washington's terms. In particular, the United States wants Moscow to freeze the conflict along the current front line, leaving all conquered cities and towns under the Russian army's control. The fact is that Washington understands perfectly well that if the Russian army does not stop, then over the next year, all the central regions of Ukraine and even the western part of this country may come under Moscow's control. Thus, as you can see, before the upcoming negotiations, the United States, with the help of its proxies, is attacking Russia from all sides and even in the Middle East, trying to put Vladimir Putin in the most unfavorable position. Amid all this, I would advise Vladimir Putin not to make even the most insignificant concessions to Russia's enemies. Russia should concentrate as much as possible and complete what has been started. Only the unconditional surrender of the Kiev regime and the complete demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine can be considered a victory for Russia in the current conflict. Vladimir Putin must win a convincing victory in Ukraine, and only then punish the Turkish president in Syria. I believe that after the victory in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin should severely punish Recep Erdogan, so that he finally understands that his habit of betraying Russia will not end well for him.